That, to my mind, is not at all bad for someone who can't draw cars. This is a Hispano-Suiza Alfonso XIII. Good old Alfonso, King of Spain, owned several Hispano-Suizas, and this model, built in 1912, was named after him, which in my view is a deal more distinguished than having a pub named after you. What I shall now be putting in the background, because nothing could be more apt, is this glorious hotel in the middle of Madrid. And it couldn't be more apt because it was commissioned by Alfonso himself to entertain other European royals, of whom there was a sizable number in those dear dead days just before the First World War. It's an embarrassment of riches. I mean, there are some 40 Hispano-Suizas parked out here, creating possibly the world's most glamorous car park. The reason why they're all lined up here in the middle of Madrid is they've reached the halfway mark of an 800-mile rally through the magnificent rustic parts of northern Spain. They're about to take part in the Concours d'Elegance, hence the tie on the blazer. We're here to tell you the fascinating story of the Hispano-Suiza and that rare and mildly eccentric breed who still drives them.
Cars from Spain, Germany, France and Britain you'd expect. But among the entrants, there were also Hispano-Suiza enthusiasts from the USA, Mexico, Australia, South Africa, even Argentina.
Oh, you knew that? Nice to see you here. How are you? Nice to see you. Yeah, just arrived. We just arrived.
Flooding into the port of Santander, the vehicles represented a production run of over 30 years, from the vast limousines and glamorous touring cars of the 30s back to the very first pre-World War I Alfonso races. Wheel-to-wheel opulence, with the sort of car that may have dominated the track, but could be rather temperamental in the starting department. From the off, on Spain's northern coast, the rally route would be a stern test of elderly, fragile, and in many cases almost priceless machinery. Winding across some of the country's most rugged terrain, but with overnight stops at some magnificent paradors, the cars were headed for Madrid's Ritz Hotel. There they would commemorate its 80th anniversary, and after appropriate pauses for celebration, return to the coast. The Basque send-off showed how seriously the Spanish took the event, and as Mr. Milligan's vast V12 9.5-litre limousine with coachwork by Van Vuren eased over the line, no doubt in top gear already, the rally was on. Senor Quintana is more used to being behind the wheel of a Testarossa. He's the main distributor of Ferraris in Spain. But now with his 1912 racer well and truly fired up, he too is away on a journey that will be something of a tribute to the life's work of one brilliant man, Marc Birkit. Birkit, a young Swiss engineer, arrived in Spain in 1899 and was soon involved in the embryonic car industry. The Hispano-Suiza company was formed in 1904 with Birkit as chief engineer, and this very early 14-horsepower model drew on his early experiences. In 1909, urged on by the young King Alfonso of Spain, he built a new 4-cylinder engine for the car. The following year, with a bigger engine, his star driver Zuccarelli won a prestigious coupe at Boulogne. The king, who was said to drive like a cannonball in a cloud of smoke, was delighted and gave his name to a new model, the famous Alfonso XIII, according to some authorities, the world's first true sports car. After the introduction of the Alfonso, Hispano's reputation for quality and elegance grew, and sales multiplied. By now, Birkit, totally dedicated to his work, had moved the company to a new factory in Spain and had opened a branch factory in Paris. The cars had become the darlings of the international set. Nesting storks have special significance for Hispano owners. The flying stork mascot is one of the most cherished and distinctive features of post-World War I cars, and this association with Hispano came about because in the run-up to the Great War, Burkitt had switched his attention to designing a 150 horsepower aero engine, which was to influence aviation worldwide. Over 50,000 were built, and they powered many Allied planes, including those of French ace Georges Guinema, who used the Stork as the symbol of his Spad squadron. The aircraft engines live on, but not just in restored aeroplanes. After the war, many drivers installed these 18.5-litre V8s in racing cars. And on the rally, John Old from Victoria in Australia turned up in just such a beast. Vibration had broken a strut, but with some help from a bewildered Spanish mechanic, a luggage strap was modified to hold the front wings together, and the car was soon back on the road.
Perfecto.
John revels in speed. He flies aeroplanes, he bought 2 Spad fighters while in Spain, and drives regularly in vintage car rallies. This fearsome car, straight out of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, is so fast he could afford to leave a couple of hours behind everyone else and still be first at the bar in the evenings. By now, the rally was deep into Spain, on the sort of endless straits the great cars must have encountered in the 30s as they made their way across Europe on the Grand Tour. Ah, great days. But there were casualties. Roy Middleton.
Well, what sort of condition was she in when you first got hold of her?
A complete wreck.
Yeah.
It was found on a farm in Cornwall with just the front half under a barn and the back end stuck in the open. The engine and gearbox was out and in boxes, and it looked a very sorry state.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was the day I brought it home was our first divorce.
You do all your own restoring and...
Yes, I do. This car I restored over a period of 12 years. I have a chap comes in and helps me about 2 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, and we do as much as we can in-house, machining of new parts, and most of the parts that wear out are the spare parts are worn out.
Yeah.
So you have to have them made, and most people go to a small engineering shop who specialise in one-offs and have the part made for them.
Is this the largest number of them you've seen gathered together in one spot?
I think it's the largest number anybody has ever seen gathered together in one spot. Oh yes, this is a fantastic gathering.
Lord Montague and daughter Mary were in the National Motor Museum's 1912 Alfonso and relishing the challenge. With its long-stroke 4-cylinder 3.5-litre engine, the car is still capable of over 65 miles an hour, or perhaps not. I mean, there was still half the rally to go. But as the gradient steepened out in the mountains, some of the cars were beginning to feel the strain. An H6 racer driven by Philippe Louton from France had already lost its engine, and he and his wife were forced to spend the rest of the rally as passengers. Bernard Paris from Tunbridge in Kent was simply wafting along in his 1921 H6 Tourer. Hardly surprising, for his power came from half a V12 aero engine, 6.5 litres of mechanical perfection. The H6 was unequalled from its launch in 1919 for its appearance, technology, and matchless performance. Its four-wheel servo-assisted brakes were much admired, and even Rolls-Royce subsequently took out a license on them. The chassis carried a variety of bodies, and thanks to the great flexibility of the engines, were capable of handling heavy coachwork. But the open Tourers, the cars of legend, they're the eye-catchers. This is a 1922 boat-deck torpedo body from Henri Labourdette, just one of the top coach builders who joined forces with Hispano to turn out some of the world's most elegant and occasionally outrageous designs. Lunchtime found the rally converging on Saria. For the drivers, a breather and a chance for another quick polish. Of course, cars like these were designed to sweep up the gravel drives of mansions, slide to a halt in front of a grand hotel. The extreme flexibility of the engine can be easily demonstrated, and Louis Lescure derived much pleasure from watching people's faces as he just lifted the compression lever and let the magnificently maintained heart of his car tick over happily at under 100 revs per minute.
She doesn't want. She wants to rest.
But there's no rest for the ever-faithful band of pushers. The Quintanos are off again, and having a bit more luck as they set off with the rest of the convoy for Sigüenza than Tim Hewison, whose H6's pinion bearing had seized. The car was now on board the Grua, a backup truck trailing the rest of this exotic fleet. Lieutenant Commander Morin Scott, raconteur and former Hispano racer.
I had all mine in the 50s. My first one I bought for £45, the next two for £100, and the last one for £25. And then something went wrong, and I emigrated to Jamaica, and I ran out of money in crown wheel and pinions at the same time, and so I sold it for enough money to buy an Austin Princess and a Jeep, you know, even though it wouldn't go.
With the bells ringing out invitingly from the hilltop village of Medina Celi, it was decided it was time to take a break from the rally. The redoubtable commander, accompanied by the car's owner John Howell and society journalist Meredith Etherington Smith, just wandered contentedly. Must be siesta time, after which the commander, by his own admission, tends not to drive.
It is like the other world, isn't it? Palazzo de las Duques de Medina. It's just it's a ducal palace.
Time to move on, and time to muse on the homecoming of this most prestigious mark.
You know, there's some pleasure in owning probably the finest motor car that's ever been made. The finest design, the best workmanship, and everything that they did. I mean, in those days, it wasn't a question of throwing the thing together in a factory. They weathered the castings for 2 years before they actually machined them, and that sort of thing, you know. Nobody can afford to do that today. They were not cheap. A chassis in the 20s cost about £2,500. You took it to a bodybuilder, and he would charge you about £1,500 to put a body on. So that was about £4,000. And after all, in those days, you could buy a very nice house for £1,000, which today would perhaps cost you £100,000. So you're talking the equivalent of £400,000 in today's money.
The stopover in Sigüenza was taken within the walls of an 11th century castle, keep, crenellations and all. The locals had breached the portcullis and were swarming enthusiastically around this unlikely display, to the consternation of their proud owners. John Old had other matters on his mind.
These engines, the aircraft engines, were made just for sort of constant speed, not on, off, on, off. And when you take the foot off, it gets a load of oil and just fouls up the plugs every now and again. Just if you can get a decent burst, it'll come clean. But we're going into Madrid tomorrow, so I thought I'll give them a clean. There's 16 of them to do, that's the only thing.
Saturday morning, and the cars set off the 80-mile drive into the capital. Most of the older cars were surviving remarkably well, but the Quintano's Alfonso, unrestored, let's be fair, had run into a number of mechanical problems. Elena and Juan maintained an air of calm dignity throughout, but they did seem destined to push the car all the way around Spain. On the outskirts of Madrid, I'd hitched a lift with Jean-Paul Dubroca, who's a pilot for Air France.
Do you find this more relaxing than piloting a 747?
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm never stressed.
How old is she?
This is from 1921.
Beautiful. And designed by a boat builder, I think. When was this?
Yes, it's about like a boat.
Yeah. Was that done originally, or was it?
Yes, yes. Completely original.
Yeah. So somebody obviously enjoyed boating.
And it was restored to original condition.
Yeah.
Exactly the same color, everything is original.
With a police escort that tended to err more to enthusiasm than expertise, we made our grand entrance into the city. So that we didn't get lost, we hung on enthusiastically to the car ahead, and many a red light passed imprudently behind us. Quintano's Alfonso was up to his old tricks again. But they were determined not to be denied. And an exhilarating 30 minutes later, they and the rest of the caravan arrived at the Plaza Mayor. Who says the rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain?
Luis, tell me something of your beautiful, beautiful vehicle.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I can see it's
It was
1918.
It was born in 1918, really, in Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yes. And this was one of the 2,000 cars built by Hispano-Suiza of this modern size. It was built between 16 and 1924. It was running in a private family. It was sold to the public office of Bordius, I think.
The undertaker.
Undertaker, yes. Look at here. You will see, but very rarely, La Hispano-Suiza Barcelona, because most of the bodies were not manufactured in the factory. And it was built in 1918, and this was the Lux model. And it's a transition between the old ones and the new H6 Paris 1920.
That is very beautiful, isn't
Very
it?
beautiful.
Dashboard.
The dashboard,
Brass
yes.
and...
Yes.
Ah.
Everything.
It's the enthusiasm of people like Luis de Villa Cascante that makes the owners, as far as I'm concerned, as interesting as the cars themselves. They're all characters. And none more so than Louis Lescure.
Stop! You have no idea.
Is it okay?
You have no idea.
Is it okay?
How has it been for you so far then, monsieur? Au moment, BBC. Ici. How was your trip into Madrid? I'm surprised to see you here.
Qu'est-ce qu'il me raconte? Moi, j'y comprends rien.
Oh mon Dieu.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ce baragouin qui raconte?
Ça va, là.
Il est quoi exactement comme origine?
Ça va, le trip à Madrid pour vous,
Hey, tu
monsieur.
peux pas parler comme tout le monde, non?
God, it's going to be hell in
Il
1992.
suffit de parler comme tout
Well,
le
we're all
monde.
going to have to talk like this in 1992. I mean, there are people
Il est
looking forward
gentil.
to it.
Il est gentil. You mean that you don't want any more the channel? The
Let
channel?
me help you down, poor foreigner. How old is this fine creature then?
Eh?
When was this built?
The body was built in 1929, beginning 1929.
And how long have you owned it?
I had it for now 35 years. It's a very old love affair.
It seems to be with everybody.
Yeah.
It's
In my case, yes.
It is
because-
passion, isn't it?
Because I discovered it, the value was zero. I found it a day before the scrapyard owner was coming to the garage and taking the car to the scrapyard.
How long did it take you to put it together again?
I was lucky enough to find a man the only man in charge of Hispano car in France after the war. And this car, in other words, this car has never been touched by any mechanist who was not a specialist of Hispano.
Sunday, for the majority of the inhabitants of this elegant and historic city, is traditionally a day of rest. But for the patrons of the Hotel Ritz, it's the day of the Concours d'Elegance, and from early morning, polishing and preening were very much in evidence. As the great moment neared, the last touches were added, and the elegance was much in evidence. No car buff eye, but clearly the atmosphere was getting to me. I mean, I couldn't resist adding a touch or two of my own. The excitement mounted, but for some, the tension was obviously starting to show.
Hey! Go!
And you smile for about 15 seconds. 15 seconds. You look at your watch and then you move on round, which is telling you exactly what you know. Lovely.
A few final instructions and the Concours was underway. This 1906 T3040 Tourer was the oldest car in the event. Noted in its day for the unique construction of the engine and gearbox, it was driven by Fausto Saavedra, president of the veteran division of the Auto Club of Spain, who had brought it into the rally just for the day. So now there were 40 cars and over 80 passengers, all fully entering into the spirit of the thing and putting on the Ritz.
Obsérvense la gracia del abanico. Muchas gracias.
The winner of the Concours was finally judged to be Jim Hull from Los Angeles in the US of A, the co-owner of this exotic 1935 cabriolet. Beautifully appointed in every way. The gala dinner that evening, to celebrate the laying of the foundation stone upon which this regal pile was built, was traditionally presented in both its music and cuisine, and some of us were moved to join in. Then, the festivities over, it was back to the realities of the long drive home. Passing the magnificent palace at El Escorial and climbing into the mountains, there were mixed fortunes. Celebrating his most popular award for tenaciously working a 14-hour stint with his wife and two local mechanics to overcome his earlier engine problems, a triumphant Tim Hewison pulled in to enjoy the view. Meanwhile, Jules Human, president of the Hispano-Suiza Society of America, no less, had realized what was hampering his progress.
Not charging. Yeah, the next stop I'll regulate the voltage regulator so it'll come up.
Okay.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much. Without you, without BBC.
Faithfully trailing the caravanserai, the Gruar was soon to come into its own. Mary Montague, now at the wheel of the family Alfonso, was in big trouble.
Oh well.
Bad. Ja, jasno si.
But just what was the problem?
The valves, making a really horrible noise about sort of a couple of miles back, and so we thought we'd stop and have a look, and it's getting really bad, so we thought we'd stop, and then luckily the mechanics came along and just in time and listened in and said, oh no, it's not good, and somebody else stopped and said, no, it's not good, you shouldn't carry on, we'll try and fix it tonight. Perhaps someone will have a spare, I'm not mechanical, a spare part, yeah, don't know any more than that. Just hope they can do their best.
The part turned out to be a big end, and further maintenance would have to be deferred until the car could be returned home to Bewley. But running repairs were sufficient to get Senor Pierre's 1925 back into the rally, the relief for the Argentinian, and for the exuberant Howells who were soon powering on towards the night stop at Tordesillas. This infectious joie de vivre, coupled with the ability to sweep grandly across the plains of Europe, unleashed within me a quiver of desire, perhaps to join the Hispano-owning elite. But how difficult would that be? I intercepted Charles Howard.
Charles, most of the souls here, 99% probably, are enthusiasts, pure and simple. But you are actually trade.
I'm trade, yes. Beyond the pale.
You deal in these.
I deal in them.
Tell me one small thing. First of all, are there any yet undiscovered Hispanos somewhere halfway up a mountain in Bolivia or anything like that?
I would think very, very few. Maybe one or two lurking in the odd chateau in France, but the chance of finding a Hispano Suiza in a barn are about as good as finding a Goya in a junk shop in Southend.
So how therefore are we going to come across one?
You'd read the specialist magazines, study the top dealers, and subscribe to the catalogue of the auctioneers. I always boast that my spy network, which enables me to find cars, is slightly better than the CIA network, in as much as I make fewer boobs than they do, and I find, it's a more successful espionage service, put it that way, dollar for dollar, my espionage service, which is works day and night, and I get phone calls and faxes and telexes and whispers in the ear, and that's how it works. It's what's now known as networking, and used to be called contact.
Somebody somewhere knows that you will want to know, and he'll say, I have seen this.
And the more you buy, the more you're offered.
Well, Peter Briggs has been offered and has bought over 150 classic cars.
It's like the Mille Miglia.
Yes. I love it, don't they?
This beautifully restored Alfonso is from his collection back home in Australia, and it's one of his favourites. It must be. He had it flown here in a jumbo jet. It was originally owned by a fire chief in Victoria, who, hearing of the car's sporting performance, bought it so he could get to the fires first. And so to the final stage of an event that had become not so much a rally, more a grand tour. As the cars toiled through the hills around Cervera de Pisuerga, there was a mounting sense of satisfaction. Even elation. The Olds, characteristically sweeping through the tail enders, sped on towards an evening of drinks, speeches, and farewell celebrations, followed by the Gruar, now also carrying a final casualty, James Panier's K6. which are retired with a shattered rear-end pinion. However, the great majority of these cars, all built more than 50 years ago, had completed 7 days exhilarating motoring without any problems at all. Driven with tremendous enthusiasm and elan, the silver Storks had returned home, providing a fitting tribute to the genius of the Swiss engineer Mark Burkitt and of his adopted country, a land of music, wine, sunshine, and the Hispano-Suiza.
Next week at the same time, Top Gear features a classic rally from Tower Bridge to Cortina in Italy.